Good evening. First at 6 o'clock, Mystical, a well-known rapper on the wrong side of the law tonight, his third arrest over the past 2 decades.
Things have just gone from bad to worse to an absolute shit show for Mystical, one of hip-hop's biggest rappers of the early 2000s. The rapper has been in and out of assault cases twice, and he has defeated them each time, even when he was facing a life sentence. But luck might have run out on him this third time, because one of Mystical's victims just revealed details in court that might see him spend the rest of his life behind bars. So is this the end? Are we witnessing the complete self-destruction of a legacy artist in real time? And if we are, how did he get here? I'm asking, how did Mystical destroy his own self? Prayers before assault.
51-year-old Michael Tyler, also known as Mystical, was arrested on multiple charges, including first-degree and domestic abuse battery.
On the 30th of July, 2022, at Mystical's Prairieville, Louisiana home, a woman was assaulted in the most confusing way imaginable. The victim, who was Mystical's longtime baby mama, claimed that the incident was triggered by a dispute over money. Mystical allegedly became enraged after accusing the woman of taking money from him, which led to a violent altercation. The tension between Mystical and the victim escalated rapidly. Witnesses reported hearing loud shouting and objects being thrown within the confines of the home. The situation quickly turned physical as Mystical allegedly punched the woman, choked her, and even pulled out her hair. The victim was left bruised, battered, and terrified. But the horror didn't end there. Mystical, in a disturbing display of control and dominance, allegedly prevented the woman from leaving the premises. He confiscated her keys and cell phone, leaving her trapped and helpless. The victim begged Mystical to let her go, but Mystical didn't listen. Then, in a shocking turn of events, Mystical's rage seemed to reduce for a moment. Then it was replaced by remorse. Then it was followed up by a twisted sense of spirituality. The victim revealed in court how Mystical, in an attempt to cleanse her off bad spirits, prayed with her. He even sprinkled alcohol on her face to wash away those bad spirits. Then Mystical forced the victim onto a bed, overpowering her before proceeding to sexually assault her, violating her in the most intimate and degrading manner imaginable. After the assault, the victim managed to escape. She went straight to the hospital. They did this kit thing to gather all the evidence like they do in these situations. The doctors there said her injuries matched what she told them about being assaulted. And get this, when the detectives looked into it, they found some of her hair and a broken fingernail at Mystical's place. Mystical was arrested the very next day on July 31st and initially charged with 2 misdemeanors, simple criminal damage to property and false imprisonment. However, as the investigation unfolded, 3 more felony charges were added, including domestic abuse battery by strangulation, simple robbery, and first degree. The gravity of the allegations against Mystical cannot be understated, but this is not the first time he has faced accusations of sexual assault. In 2003, he pleaded guilty to sexual battery and extortion in connection to the of his former hairstylist. He served 6 years in prison before being released in 2010. 2 years later, he faced further legal troubles when he violated his probation in connection to the same case, resulting in a 2-month stint behind bars. It was Mystical's troubled past that cast a dark shadow over the current allegations, raising questions about his behavior and the safety of those around him, especially because his attorney was seeking bail on his behalf. His attorney maintained his client's innocence, stating that there had never been any suggestion of domestic violence between Mystical and the victim. Now bear in mind that the charges against Mystical carry severe legal consequences. If found guilty of first degree, he could face a lengthy prison sentence. In Louisiana, first degree is a serious felony offense that can result in life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The other charges, including domestic abuse battery by strangulation and simple robbery, also carry significant penalties. Ultimately, Mystical was denied bond, and his attorney expressed disappointment with the judge's decision to deny bond. He argued that there had never been any suggestion of domestic violence between Mystical and the victim, and that he believed Mystical wasn't capable of further harm. But how true is this? We might have glazed over the incident that happened back in 2002 and 2003, but it was really serious, and it had a striking semblance to this case that might see him rot in the pen. Crazy enough, he pleaded guilty to sexual battery and extortion back in 2003, and even though you could say that he ultimately beat the case because he spent 6 years instead of the life sentence he should have gotten. However, he still had to be registered as a lifetime sex offender. Back in the summer of 2002, Mystical asked his hairstylist to swing by his place in Baton Rouge, saying he needed his braids done, but there was more to it than that, and the hairstylist had no idea what she was walking into. Turns out, Mystical had some serious money issues on his mind he wanted to address. And when she showed up, he laid it all out. He told her that he found out about some shady checks that she'd been cashing from his bank account, which totaled a whopping $80,000. Obviously, he wasn't happy. But instead of taking things up with the police like any normal civilian would, Mystical decided to take matters into his own hands. And things escalated pretty quickly. The stylist started giving excuses that just didn't add up. And soon enough, Mystical got more and more frustrated. This is where things went down dirty. He told her that she could either have sex with him to make it all go away, or he'll go to the cops about the money mess. Feeling cornered and scared, the stylist reluctantly agreed to Mystical's demands. But here's where it takes a really dark turn. Mystical called up his two bodyguards, Ellis and Carter, and told them to come over right away. When they got there, Mystical got Ellis to film everything, making sure every detail was caught on tape. Reports suggest that as the camera rolled, Mystical became increasingly aggressive with the hairstylist, and the woman was violated by all three men. The incident left her traumatized and scarred. The hairstylist, overwhelmed by the weight of what had transpired, decided to report the incident to the police. The police, armed with the woman's report, swiftly took action. A raid was conducted on Mystical's residence, and during the search, they made a shocking discovery. Hidden away in a safe, they found the tape that captured the disturbing events that had unfolded that fateful day. The evidence was damning, and the legal system swung into motion. On July 18, 2002, Mystical, along with his bodyguards Leland Pokey Ellis and Versi the Fifth Carter, was arrested in connection to the incident. The charges were severe, including aggravated and extortion. In the midst of legal turmoil, Mystical's attorney tirelessly negotiated with the state prosecutor, striving for the best possible outcome for his client. After rigorous discussions, a plea bargain emerged. Mystical opted to admit guilt to a lesser charge of sexual battery in exchange for a reduced sentence. However, in December 2003, Mystical withdrew his previous plea of guilt to sexual battery and no contest to extortion. The reason behind this sudden reversal was startling. It turned out that the prosecutors had handed the judge a videotape allegedly depicting the sexual assault. Mystical's defense team feared this new evidence could undermine their case, prompting them to retract the guilty plea. To their astonishment, the prosecution agreed to keep the tape sealed and not present it as evidence. Yet when the judge requested to view the tape before sentencing, the prosecution agreed. Mystical's defense felt betrayed, believing the tape would remain confidential indefinitely. On January 15, 2004, Mystical was sentenced to a 6-year prison term for sexual battery against his former hairstylist. The judge took into account Mystical's 2 prior arrests for drug and gun possession earlier in his career. Additionally, Mystical was required to register as a sex offender under Louisiana state law. The judge criticized Mystical's belief that he was above the law and that the plea deal had spared him from a harsher sentence. Mystical's release from prison would be followed by 5 years of probation with strict conditions. Any violation of these conditions could result in up to 10 more years behind bars. Carter and Ellis, Mystical's bodyguards, also faced legal consequences for their involvement in the incident. Carter served a 4-year sentence, while Ellis served 3 years after pleading guilty. Mystical also paid the woman $350,000, his way of continuing to try to make up to all involved for the distress. Now you hear all this and think to yourself, this has got to be a monster. How does anyone become so cruel to women? How does a black man become so cruel to black women? Then you circle back and it clicks. Actually, this is dumb. How can a man that was rich and could afford to get anything he wanted, women and material things, throw everything away in one mad act? Well, I wish I could give you a sensible answer. I wish I could give you a villain origin story. Unfortunately, I can't, because even the first tragedy in Mystical's life doesn't justify the monster he became. The first tragedy.
Major James Brown comparisons for obvious reasons. That's got to be a compliment.
Big time. You know, my mom was a big-time James Brown, you know what I'm saying, fan, so.
Mystical's mom was a single mother, and that's because Mystical's father died when he was just 7. Mystical was born Michael Tyler in the vibrant city of New Orleans, Louisiana, which everyone knows has a rich musical heritage. Mystical himself has often mentioned how growing up in New Orleans shaped his musical style. The city of New Orleans gave him a different rhythm and inspired in him a different style of music. But beyond the music scene, he appreciated other aspects of his hometown. In an interview with XXL, he explained, "New Orleans is different from everywhere. We didn't have gangs like in California, so you didn't have to worry about all that." He likened his upbringing to The Cosby Show without all the money acknowledging the poverty around him, but also how his mom shielded him from its harsh realities. She didn't let him know how poor they were, so he never really felt it. Despite growing up in the 12th Ward, one of New Orleans' most impoverished and violent areas, Mystical was fortunate. Many kids in his neighborhood turned to selling drugs for income, but Mystical's mother, Marie Tyler, a single parent, along with their large extended family, ensured a different path for Mystical and his 2 siblings, Michelle and Maurice. They surrounded the children with love and support, emphasizing the importance of excelling in school, attending church regularly, and steering clear of crime. Now you see why this doesn't fit the mold of the kind of man Mystical would become. Even though Mystical had been rapping on the side for a minute, he really got a wake-up call about the skills needed to spit bars when he was in high school. One day, this other rapper stepped to him in the hallway, talking about how he could outshine Mystical. And you know what? He did. That was the hard and fast moment that that Mystical realized that besides just telling a story, rapping also meant you had to flex and show off to grab attention. Rapping was also about clout. So right after that, Mystical started crushing all the other MCs in his neighborhood with his theatrics as well as his rhymes. I wanted a certain reaction. If you laugh, that's like a woo to me because I done said something hard. That's why I evolved into such a live performer. This was what Mystical would later tell Jive Records. Now, even though Mystical was known for his lyrical game, he didn't initially make a name for himself in New Orleans through rapping. Nah, it was his moves on the dance floor with the Converse crew that caught folks' attention. But when dancing lost its shine, Mystical, like a lot of other Southern hip-hop artists, switched gears to explore different sides of the culture, like rapping and producing, to express themselves. Over in New Orleans, KLC was holding it down in the rap game as a producer and DJ for the 3-9 Posse crew. He clocked Mystical's unique style and brought the young rapper into the studio to lay down some early demo tape. But the economic realities of life didn't spare Mystical. He was broke. So as soon as he was done at Cohen High School and trying to make ends meet with a bunch of odd jobs, Mystical decided to hit pause on his rap dreams and joined up with the United States Army. He served during the Gulf War while still keeping his ear to the ground for what was happening in the New Orleans rap scene, sneaking home whenever he could. Once his time with the Army was up, he came back to New Orleans, where the local rap groups and labels were starting to make waves nationally. Mystical saw a chance to turn his old hobby into a real career and wasted no time calling up KLC for a hand. Now, KLC was juggling a bunch of other hip-hop acts, but he was down to help Mystical out. He promised to produce an album for the aspiring rapper after wrapping up projects with 3-9 Posse and Lil Slim, who was going by Soulja Slim by then. But Mystical was a little too eager to make moves. He didn't want to wait around, so he ended up signing with another local label called Big Boy Records. In early 1995, he dropped his self-titled debut, but he didn't get the love he was hoping for from the hometown crowd. See, at that time, a new sound called bounce was blowing up the New Orleans scene. I had to compete with the bounce artist popularity that was going on in New Orleans, Mystical said. It was difficult for him to get people to listen to his music, but that didn't stop him from trying. Before long, folks in the neighborhood started paying attention to Mystical, and their backing scored him a distribution deal with Jive Records out in New York. They re-released his debut album, adding in some extra tracks, and dropped it as The Mind of Mystical in February 1995. That album moved over 500,000 copies and got airplay all across the country. But Mystical still found himself in a tight spot money-wise. You know how they say sometimes it has to get worse before it gets better? Well, the reality of that quote was about to hit Mystical like a freight train on a train track. Mystical was the second born of two kids, his younger brother Maurice and his older sister Michelle. Michelle was his rock. She was just as talented as him, although in a different genre. She was an R&B artist, and she was good, so good that she collaborated with him on early tracks. She sang the chorus on Not That, and when Mystical was signed to Jive Records, she also got signed as an R&B artist. They were meant to take over the world together and pull their family out of poverty. But then, their plans hit the mud when Michelle got murdered. In an interview with Vlad TV, Mr. Cal would reveal that he found his sister dead in their house with 16 stab wounds. I found her. Thank God it was me and not my little brother, not my mom or somebody like that. I found my sister in her bed dead with a Mystical promotion t-shirt on saying, "I'm not that on it." That was the name of his first single, the same single she had collaborated with him on. To make matters worse, it was on his birthday. The prime suspect was Damian Neville, Michelle's boyfriend. But there was a problem. Damian was also the grandson of the famous Neville brothers. So you can understand why, despite the fact that Neville confessed to the crime, he was later acquitted because of lack of evidence. Mystical chalked it up to the fact that his family had influence and his were nobodies. But Mystical wasn't about to let it go. You can imagine the kind of grief he was constantly processing. He wanted revenge. In his own words, there was more than one way to skin a cat. But his mother intervened. She caught the rapper before he made a mistake that could have changed the course of his life and told him to choose a different option. So Mystical, in his grief and anguish, obeyed his mom and redirected his pain into his music. He released a song called Murderer, in which he accused Neville of being responsible for his sister's death. The lyrics were filled with raw emotion and a burning desire for revenge. He dedicated several songs to his sister, which resonated with his fans who could feel the intensity of his emotions. Mystical's grief was overwhelming. The loss of his sister, the pain of not knowing who was truly responsible for her death, weighed heavily on his heart. He couldn't comprehend how someone could commit such a brutal act, stabbing Michelle 16 times in her own home. The sheer brutality of the attack also left investigators puzzled. How could such a vicious and brutal act go unnoticed? No one heard any screams, no one heard any signs of a struggle. Anyone watching could see that this was an inflection point for the rapper, a canon event. But while grief turned some into better people, Mystical saw grief eat him up and turn him into the worst version of himself. The success and the terrible fall of Mystical's career.
Like when I say I represent Third Ward Cali, that's my hood, you know what I'm saying? I'm gonna bring my boy Mystical out to give him some No Limit Soldier. Get Mystical. He's on your label too, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, okay. The sun's gonna stain my eyes if I put it backwards.
Oh, no, you straight.
After his sister's death, Mystical's career began to see insane success. But he was already on the highway to hell, even if he didn't know it. Because he would tell Vlad in an interview that after Michelle's death, he lost the fear of death. He was prepared to die at any time. In 1994, he released his debut album, Mystical Madness. Fortunately, his debut caught the attention of fellow rap artist Master P, the CEO of No Limit Records. While Mystical Madness garnered some attention within the local music scene, it was his sophomore album, Mind of Mystical, released in 1995, that truly catapulted him to stardom. The album showcased Mystical's raw and energetic delivery, blending elements of hip-hop and southern rap. Songs like Y'all Ain't Ready Yet and Here I Go became instant hits, earning him a dedicated fan base and critical acclaim. Besides rap music, Mystical had another connection with the No Limits chief, Master P too, because he had lost a sibling. Master P's younger brother Kevin had died in a drug-related murder. So with Mystical's first album for No Limits titled Unpredictable, Master P encouraged him to explore his feelings surrounding the tragedy. The album was released in 1997, and it contained a tribute to his sister called Shine, as well as a song addressed to Damian Neville called Murderer 2. In 1999, Mystical returned with Ghetto Fabulous, produced by No Limits production team known as Beats by the Pound, and featuring guest appearances by No Limit artists, as well as Busta Rhymes and Naughty by Nature, two of the rapper's personal influences. In early 2000, Mystical reunited with KLC at the producer's spacious home studio to start work on his next album, Let's Get Ready to Rumble, expected for release later in the year. Now a successful rap star with financial security, Mystical lived in a large home in New Orleans in an exclusive gated community. He had gotten to the mountaintop. There were two paths now. He could either keep going up or he could fall all the way down. Well, at first it was up, because it was his fourth studio album, Let's Get Ready, released in 2000, that truly solidified Mystical's place in music history. The album spawned several chart-topping hits, including the iconic Shake Your Ass and Danger, Been So Long. These songs showcase Mystical's ability to create infectious party anthems while maintaining his unique lyrical style. Let's Get Ready became a commercial success, reaching platinum status and earning Mystical widespread recognition. But then you never know what's happening behind closed doors. And for Mystical behind closed doors, he was on the way down. Full circle to where we began with this video. Scandals in 2002, he found himself embroiled in a highly publicized legal battle, which had a significant impact on his career. Allegations of sexual assault and extortion, resulting in Mystical's arrest and subsequent legal proceedings. But at first, this did not undermine his talent and impact on the music industry. It slowed him down, but it didn't kill him. However, his incarceration in 2004 dealt the killing blow, 6 years behind bars. In the years behind bars, Mystical faced two separate incidents that would further tarnish his reputation and land him back in the legal spotlight. The first incident involved his failure to file tax returns for the years 1998 and 1999. It was revealed that Mystical had failed to fulfill his legal obligation of filing tax returns for the years 1998 and 1999. These charges were considered misdemeanors, but they still carried significant consequences. The court allowed Mystical to serve his 1-year federal sentence concurrently with his 6-year state sentence for the previous sexual battery conviction. This decision denied him parole rights that he would have otherwise been eligible for after 2006. But then he served his time, and by 2010, he got out.
What would you say was the lowest point in your career compared to the highest point in your career?
The lowest point of my career, definitely, well, besides the death of my sister, was being incarcerated for 6 years. Looking at BET, looking at MTV, can't participate.
After his release from prison, Mystical hoped to put his troubled past behind him and focus on rebuilding his career. However, fate had other plans, and Mystical found himself entangled in legal troubles once again. In February 2012, he found himself at the center of a heated argument with his domestic partner. The details of the argument are not public, but the intensity of the situation escalated to the point where Mystical was arrested and charged with domestic abuse battery. The incident left Mystical detained for 9 days before being released on bail. However, his legal troubles were far from over. In April 2012, Mystical faced further repercussions for violating the terms of his probation. As a result, he was sentenced to 3 months in jail with credit given for the 9 days he had already served. Mystical began serving his sentence on May 14, 2012, at the East Baton Rouge Parish Jail. This period of confinement reduced his total sentence to 81 days. It was a challenging time for Mystical, who had hoped to leave his past behind and focus on his music career. These subsequent legal troubles further complicated Mystical's journey to redemption. Despite these setbacks, Mystical remained determined to move forward. However, the road to redemption would prove to be a rocky one. Mystical's legal troubles had taken a toll on his public image, and the media scrutiny surrounding his personal life and past actions intensified. The once beloved rapper now faced an uphill battle to regain the trust of his fans in the music industry. As the years passed, Mystical's popularity waned, and he faced an uphill battle to reclaim his former success. However, he remained resilient, believing that his talent and music would ultimately prevail. Everything he went through, all of that drama and that madness is what has led Mystical to where he is today. A 54-year-old man addicted to a destructive lifestyle that has eaten him up. And now, with the reality of a life sentence hanging over him, no one needs to wonder how Mystical destroyed his own self.